Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Fabiani, and this webinar is co-sponsored by Mass Energize, the Town of Swampscott, and Plug-in Program, which is a multi-town effort that aims to electrify homes and communities. Before we begin, please take a minute to answer the two questions you will see on your screen right now. Let me share with you. I hope you can see it.
Fabienne, the question seemed to be about solar, but we'll answer it with regard to water heaters. Yes.
Oh, is this solar? Heat pump or water heater? It shows, okay, let me see the second question. Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry, it was it was regarding water heater, heat pump water heater. So, all right. That was my mistake, sorry. Okay, thank you for your responses. Tonight, we are going to hear from Bob Zogg, a heat pump expert from Heat Smart Alliance. After his presentation, we'll have some testimonials, and then you can ask questions or submit them in the chat. With that said, I will pass it on to Bob.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Fabiani, and thank you all for coming tonight to hear about heat pumps for domestic hot water. So we will get underway here. First, I'd like to introduce the organization for which I volunteer. I'm with the Heat Smart Alliance, and our mission is to accelerate the adoption of heat pumps throughout Massachusetts. We consider applications of home heating and cooling and water heating. We're an all-volunteer organization. We have over 160 participants from over 60 different Massachusetts communities. And our approach is to educate through events like this and through our website and articles and other publications to provide one-on-one coaching for individuals who wish to consider heat pumps. And we like to collaborate with other organizations as well. And just to keep ourselves objective, we do not accept donations or referral fees from installers or manufacturers. So why heat pumps? I'm going to start out a little broad here, and then we'll narrow down to water heating as we go, just to get the big picture. Let's first look at how we use energy in Massachusetts. This chart on the left, this little pie chart shows our energy breakdown in Massachusetts, and fully almost 30% of our energy is in the residential sector, and that does not include our vehicles. Now we break that 30% down further, and almost 60% is for home heating and cooling, and almost 20% is for water heating, and a bit more for clothes drying. And I flag those loads because you add those up, those are almost 80% of the energy in our homes. And all of those loads can be met with heat pumps. So heat pumps can have a big impact on how we use energy. If you wish to decarbonize your home, there's 3 basic steps. Step number 1 is to weatherize to the fullest practical extent. That really means insulating and air sealing your home. And I think most of you are in the Mass Save program, and you're eligible for a no-cost home energy assessment. That's a great way to get started on that. Step number 2 is to electrify. This means converting all of your fossil fuel fired equipment to high efficiency electric equipment. And this is where the heat pumps come in. Step number 3 is to make sure you're using 100% renewable electricity. You can put solar panels on your home, but you don't have to. We can all purchase 100% renewable electricity through the grid. Okay, what is a heat pump? Basically, a heat pump is a device that moves heat from a cooler place to a warmer place. We all know intuitively that heat naturally flows from warm places to cool places, but if we want to reverse that flow of heat, we have to use a mechanical device and we have to add energy. We have heat pumps in our homes already, but we don't call them heat pumps. Our refrigerators, our dehumidifiers, our air conditioners, all use the same basic technology as heat pumps. Heat pumps are available for home heating and cooling. That's one piece of equipment that provides both heating and cooling. They're available for water heating, even for clothes drying and pool heating. Now we'll talk more on May 20 about home heating and cooling heat pumps. So please look for the promotional materials on that event coming up. Tonight, we're going to focus on water heating. This is just a simple illustration to show how a heat pump can be more than 100% efficient, because that's a question people often have. This example is showing a water heater that's taking 1 unit of electricity into the heat pump, using that electricity to pump 3 additional units of heat from the surrounding air, sending 4 units of heat into the water tank. So in this example, the efficiency of this water heater would be 400% or 4. So now let's get to heat pumps for water heating. Heat pump water heaters, they're also called hybrid water heaters. Do just what they imply. They're heat pumps used for water heating. You can get over 60% savings on energy and carbon emissions.
Hi.
And you could have very
Hi.
fast paybacks depending on the existing technology in your home. They can be installed by either plumbers or HVAC installers. Not every plumber installs heat pump water heaters, but most of them are getting on board with it. So if your favorite plumber doesn't do heat pump water heaters yet, try to find another favorite plumber. There's 3 basic configurations of heat pump water heaters for home heating. The most common by far is the integrated heat pump water heater. And basically this has a typical water storage tank on the bottom part with a top part that encases the heat pump. This is all packaged together at the factory, so the plumber doesn't have to deal with any refrigerant connections or anything like that. And these are great for unfinished basement installations, which is very common, or large mechanical rooms. Another type, which is much less common, but does come in handy in certain situations, is called a split system. Now, these cannot be installed by a plumber. These do require an HVAC technician. This black panel here, in this example, hangs on the wall outside of your home. So this is what gathers the heat and circulates that energy into the rest of the heat pump, which is packaged in this rectangular box. In turn, that water that gets heated by the heat pump is sent into the water tank through water lines. These are great if you have your heat pump, if you have your water heater in a tight space, like a closet that's not ventilated. If you're concerned about cold air blowing off the heat pump for any reason, they're also a little bit quieter than the integrated models, if that's a concern. But in most cases, if they're in a basement, the integrated model will work just fine. Just for completeness, I'll mention the outdoor heat pump. In this case, there is a unit that sits outdoors that encases the entire heat pump, and water is circulated to that heat pump and heated up and sent back to an indoor storage tank. Now, these can be very energy efficient, but also they're the most expensive heat pump water heater option. And there aren't very many installers who are putting these in our area. So let's talk about some of the pros and cons of heat pump water heaters. On the plus side, I mentioned over 60% reduction in carbon pollution, energy cost savings. If you're using electric resistance, that's conventional electric water heating, savings are over 60%. If you're using oil or propane, you can save 20 to 40%. They're safer, there's no combustion in the home. And with the integrated models, they can help dehumidify your basement. You still need to keep your dehumidifier because there's times when your heat pump water heater is not running that you will need to dehumidify, and they can help cool in the summer. On the downside, they do require, most models require 120-volt service. Again, if you have an electric water heater already, that's already in place. But if you're using a fossil fuel, you may need to do some wiring. There are some models that operate on 120-volt circuits, but they're not as common yet, and they probably require much larger storage tanks to work in our area. Again, there's some noise generated. Frankly, this is really only a concern if your water heater is next to a bedroom. These are quieter than a home dehumidifier. So somewhere between a refrigerator and a home dehumidifier, I think would be fair to say. You may need a slightly larger water tank than you currently have. If you're right on the cusp of having water runouts now, you may need to bump up the size. And the integrated models, if you work near your water heater for whatever reason, you have a workbench or you're in a laundry room with a water heater, you may be sensitive to cold air blowing. They do require some circulation space. They require, if they're in an enclosed area, it should be at least 8 by 10 or 10 by 10, something like that, unless that space is otherwise ventilated. They will bump up your home heating costs a bit because they are extracting a little bit of heat from your basement. We'll talk more about that. This is not as big a concern as some people think. So don't get too worried about it, but we will account for it. There is a air filter, very, very little maintenance required. I vacuum mine off every 6 months. You can also rinse it out with soapy water. Pretty simple to maintain. And you do have to have a drain or a condensate pump, but this is not a big deal. A condensate pump is easy to put in. Okay, so how much cleaner is a heat pump water heater compared to other technologies? This chart is comparing the annual carbon pollution associated with a number of different water heating technologies. And this example is for a home with 3 persons. So you can scale this up or down depending on how many people are in your home. And I'll give you a ballpark idea. As you can see, the heat pump water heaters do very well compared to fossil fuel and even conventional electric in terms of the carbon pollution. Now, I want to explain these 3 different heat pump water heater bars. This first one is assuming you achieve the efficiency as rated by the manufacturer. And in real world performance, we generally don't get quite that efficiency. And what efficiency you do get probably depends on where your water heater is. So if you're in an unfinished basement that isn't actively heated, I've accounted here for the slight increase in home heating that you would need to provide. And I've kind of rolled that into the heat pump water heater performance. So that's why that bar is a bit longer. If your water heater is in an actively heated space, like a laundry room that you keep heated all the time, that impact is a little greater, so your efficiency is a bit lower. Now, here's the magic. If you use 100% renewable energy, these bars effectively go to 0. You effectively eliminate the carbon pollution associated with your water heating. So that's the magic of electrification. Okay, let's talk about costs. This is a similar chart, but in this case, we're looking at the costs, the annual costs of heating water for your home. Again, assuming 3 occupants. Looking at the same technologies we just looked at for carbon pollution. But here you'll note that the natural gas water heater is a little higher in the ranking. And at today's prices for energy, natural gas is about the same cost or maybe slightly less expensive than a heat pump water heater. But against other fuels, and especially against conventional electric, you can save money. An important caveat here, these are today's energy costs. Over the life of your water heater, these will change, and this may look a little, these bars may look a little different. So just be aware of that and don't put too much weight on these bars. What we're trying to show here is that in general, the heat pump water heaters are cost competitive. And if you compare them to conventional electric, they are much better. So most of you are in communities that are served by the Mass Safe program. And there's some good incentives available for heat pump water heaters. If you have an integrated model, you can get a rebate of $750. If you get a split system model, it's $1,500. And the great thing about these rebates is there's no application process that you have to wait months and months to get your rebate check. They are instant. They're paid either to the distributor of the water heater, or if you purchase through Lowe's or Home Depot, they're paid directly to Lowe's or Home Depot. All you do is fill out a very simple form, and when you buy your water heater at Lowe's or Home Depot, you get an instant discount right there off your purchase price. And the Mass Safe site does provide more information and details, and you'll all get a copy of this so you can make use of the links I'm including here. On the federal side, federal tax credits. Now, of course, you have to have a tax liability to take advantage of these tax credits, but assuming you do, an integrated model can get a 30% up to $2,000 tax credit. If you need to do some electrical panel work to accommodate your heat pump water heater, you can get another 30% credit for up to $600. If you use a solar assisted split system, you get a 30% tax credit, but there's no cap. So the incentives are better for the solar assisted models, although they probably cost a little bit more to put into. And this Rewire in America site provides much more information about federal incentives and tax credits. So what should your action plan be? Convert to a heat pump water heater when your water heater is starting to get old. 7 to 10 years, believe it or not, is a pretty good life for a water heater. Might last a bit longer, depends on a lot of factors. But the very important message tonight is do not wait for this situation. If you wait for your water heater to fail, you will have a flood in the basement. You will have no showers, no hot water. This is not the time to be evaluating a new technology. It's going to be very tough for you to consider a heat pump water heater. So please plan ahead. And even at the risk of replacing that old water heater a little bit before it fails. Otherwise, you'll probably end up putting in the same water heater you had, and then you're locked out of the heat pump water heater for another 10 plus years. Okay. You might consider replacing it even earlier if you're using electric water heat now, because as we just looked at, the cost savings are quite dramatic. And you can get a quick payback even if you're replacing it a bit early. How to get started? You'll get all these links. There's more information available from a number of different sources you might find helpful. These are just a few that I think are most important. And depending on where you live, you may have access to a local volunteer coach, and I'm including links here for Natick and Wayland, Acton, and then other communities. This is just a link to the Heat Smart Alliance site, which lists communities that we know about to provide coaching, and also the communities that we as the Heat Smart Alliance coach in. So that is my presentation for tonight. I hope that was helpful, and I look forward to hearing your questions after we go through the testimonials.
Thank you, Bob. So I will call for, please forgive me if I don't say your name correctly, but Avi Font of Natick. Are you with us?
Hi there, yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Okay. I am a resident of Natick of a year and a half ago, and my wife and I moved into a house that we purchased a house that had an oil burning furnace and an oil burning hot water tank. A few months in, the expansion tank on top of our water tank failed, and water did leak for a couple hours. We luckily noticed it in the morning before we went to work. And that's when I was starting the process of thinking about a heat pump hot water heater as well as a heat pump for my whole house. So that got us moving a little faster. We were able to just remove that expansion tank temporarily to put a patch on it. But we eventually installed both a heat pump for the house and a heat pump hot water heater. And we did that this past August. The heat pump hot water heater is a Rheem 50-gallon, and the installer was a company called Forge Human Built. It's a relatively new type of HVAC company that's out of Newton. The cost of my installation for the hot water heater itself was $4,500. So far, I'm pretty happy with it. There's some learning curves with it. I decided to have the condensate pump go directly into my discharge water line of where my washing machine goes into, and that was great. It doesn't pump out outside of the house at all. It goes right into that. The Rheem brand has an app on your phone, and that allows you to really understand and see what your unit is doing. It allows you to change the temperature very quickly. You can set 4 different times and temperature per day, every day of the week. So that allows you to let it go down a little bit lower when you're not at home at work, and for you to have it come back up when you return home. And to have it go down lower when you're sleeping if you don't need to keep the temperature higher. We originally started with our max temp being 128 degrees, and then we dropped it down to 120. We now have it at 122 max and 112 max. It allows you to go from 110 to 140 degrees. We use about 100 kilowatt hours of energy per month with the heat pump hot water heater, because the app allows you to track your usage by hour, by day, by week, or by month, and you can compare all your history. Overall, I'd say we like it. We're definitely happy we went with it. There's just a learning curve of understanding how it works. Oh, one more thing. We keep ours completely in the energy saver mode of the heat pump water heater. I've used it once for the vacation mode, and that worked. It went down to 70 degrees on its own, and it used pretty much no electricity the whole time we were gone, which was cool.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
I will call now Jay Turner of Natick as well. Are you with us? I don't think they are. So the third person who was going to give a testimonial is Ellen Ton of Wayland. She couldn't make it, but she recorded her testimonial, so I will share her testimonial with you. Let me know if you cannot hear it.
Hi, this is Ellen Tone in Wayland. Sorry I can't join you in person, but here's my story about our heat pump water heater. We installed it before COVID. Our water heater was starting to fail. It was a sealed combustion gas efficient one, But we knew when we replaced that we wanted to get off combustion gas. So we opted for a heat pump version. We've been completely happy with it. We did increase the tank size so that if we had a large number of people at our house, there'd be enough hot water. There was no real difference in the cost premium of it. It has a couple of settings, heat pump only, electric resistance, high demand, and a hybrid, and we can use those different settings. We're often 2 people in the house or we're 12. So we adjust those things. It's in a room off our finished basement. We did have to upgrade electrical in order to make it work with our panel. And we took advantage of the federal tax credit under the IRA. So maybe we did it during COVID, now that I'm thinking about it. And our plumber, D.H. McLeod, did a great job. No complaints. We're very happy with the outcome. We have a vent to the room that it's in off of the finished basement. And the plumber said you might have to open the door to make sure it's getting enough air to function properly, but we've really not had any problems. There's a big undercut on that door, and we haven't noticed any changes in the temperature of the conditioned space downstairs because it's a pretty big area that we tend to keep cooler anyway. So from our perspective, it's all been good.
Great. Is there anyone here that wants to share a testimonial?
Hi, this is Nate Chichers, originally from Wellesley, Mass. And I've been helping family in Westboro navigate their Mass Save programs. So I actually have a keen interest in this because I lead the water heating at the water heating products for EPA's Energy Star program. And so I do a lot of training, and my family shared the link to this tonight. So I've replaced several gas water heaters with heat pump water heaters, 3 now, and all 3 different manufacturers. Given my government position, I can't really mention the manufacturers due to non-preference for manufacturers, but all 3 were unitary, and we do see that many people are able to install their heat pump water heaters on their own. It's a little trickier if you're getting off of a gas or sorry, if you have an oil burner. But Maine, which is sort of the gold standard for heat pump water heaters, and they've been now heat pump water heaters are the dominant technology for water heating there. For many people, it is a doable project, but not everyone's able to do that. And I'll just mention that the cost savings can be very significant, even higher than 60%, compared to the electric resistance. And some of the things that the earlier testimonies mentioned, keeping it on heat pump only mode, is one technique for doing so. But in many cases, it is a good idea to upsize the tank, especially if you're moving from a gas water heater to a heat pump water heater. You know, if you have a 40 gallon gas water heater, you really want to bump it up to 50 gallons at least, or even 65 gallons for a heat pump water heater. So just wanted to share a couple of my observations and thoughts.
Thank you, Nathaniel. So now we have time for some Q&A. I would like to start with a question from Tom Yilton of Sudbury. I know he's not here anymore, but he's interested in watching the recording afterwards. So he's asking 3 questions. First, are heat pump water heaters quiet enough to be in living room? Are some models much quieter than others? That's the first question.
Yeah, good question. If it's in a living space that you occupy a lot, it would depend on the family. if you can tolerate the noise from a portable dehumidifier, you can probably tolerate the noise from a heat pump water heater. But that may not be acceptable to some people. So if your water heater is in a space that it is occupied a lot, you may want to go with one of the split system models. Those aren't completely silent, but by taking away the indoor air fan, it does make them quieter. And there are differences from model to model. Unfortunately, sound ratings are really tricky to do well, and I don't honestly know how good the comparisons are if you look at the manufacturer's ratings, but you know, there's some guide. You might be better off finding someone who owns that type of water heater and standing next to it and see if you like what you think about the noise. But honestly, if it's in your basement and it's an unfinished basement that you don't hang out in all the time, you won't even hear it. We never hear ours, and we have much noisier things in our basement than the water heater.
Thank you, Bob. So his next question is, how much airspace around them do they need?
So if you're in a room that has no ventilation, most manufacturers recommend if you have a normal ceiling height of say 8 feet, something like 8 by 10 or 8 by 8 feet. That space doesn't have to be empty, by the way. It just needs to be a room of that size. And you can, once you put in your water heater, you can pile all your junk back in. If you have a smaller space and you're using one of these integrated models, you may have to have some ventilation slats in the doors. And as you get even smaller, you might have to actively ventilate that space. And there's ways to do that. It's not necessarily difficult to do, but it is a little bit extra work to add that ventilation.
Okay. So his next question and last one, what are the pros and cons of using a hot water recirculator with a heat pump water heater?
So by hot water recirculator, I'm going to assume he means a whole house circulator that keeps hot water in the pipes throughout the house. And I don't think it would be any different than using a conventional water heater, assuming that's what he's talking about.
Hey, Bob,
Yeah.
could I chime in on that? So the manufacturers that I've worked with, A.O. Smith, Rheem, and they've actually found that so you end up dinging the efficiency and also the lifespan of the heat pump water heaters when you have a recirculating pump. That's, people have them sometimes all the time. So if it's if it's on a timer for, you know, the time when you expect people are going to take a shower in the morning and then again at night, that's fine. And then the manufacturers are also recommending, their actual preference is to have sort of a, you know, there's a couple of manufacturers that make this. Basically, it's when you walk into there's a sensor that when you walk into the bathroom, that then it can trigger the recirculating pump, but it's not recommended to have one running more than a few hours a day with a heat pump water heater, because the whole point is that you're trying to make it much more efficient, and having to have the compressor running constantly to keep that up to temperature is counterproductive.
Yeah, well, thanks for emphasizing that, Nathaniel. And I should have pointed it out myself. It's regardless of the type of water heater, if you have a recirculation loop that's running all the time, you are throwing away a ton of energy. That's a terrible idea. It doesn't matter what type of water heater you use. Stop doing it. It needs to be on a timer or on a sensor, as Nathaniel pointed out. So I was making that assumption already, but you're right. There's some households who just run them all the time, and that's not good.
Thank you. So Jeff Levine, would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question? All right. He's asking, what is the cost what is cost comparison to gas water heater?
So actually, you already answered that question in your chart. So actually, my second question related to that, when you compare the price of the various of the water heater to various other like gas and oil and so on, what were you assuming for as the price of electricity, because it varies so much among the various towns? So what, can you tell me what kilowatt hour price of electricity you were assuming when you did that chart?
Yeah, I use 33 cents a kilowatt hour, but you're right to point out that does vary quite a bit. And even if you live in a community served by Eversource or National Grid, you still might have a different third-party supplier. You might have a community choice aggregation program. You might have solar panels. So, I mean, your cost of electricity could be very different.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Anyone else wants to ask a question before I keep reading the ones in the chat? Rob?
Yeah, I have two. I have hot water heaters, a pretty large one, 75 gallon, which has been working very well. But my daughter has another one which is a little smaller, and she recently had a problem in which one of the warning lights came on, and the plumber came over and said it was frozen up, and they had to reset the unit. I was wondering, it's in a reasonable size finished basement, and I'm really wondering if other people ran into that problem. They did talk to the manufacturer, and they didn't think it was anything wrong, but so I was wondering if that's something anybody ever heard of, that could happen.
Well, that's the first, this is a heat pump water heater that had quote unquote frozen up.
Right.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine unless the basement got incredibly cold. All heat pump water heaters will shut off at some cold temperature level, somewhere between, say, 37 degrees and 45 degrees, I think is the typical range. So these are not going to refrigerate your basement. Your basement will be a few degrees cooler than it might otherwise be.
Mm-hmm.
To get down to the point where you could actually frost the coil, it seems like it could be a situation where there was a refrigerant leak. Somehow the refrigeration system was punctured, it's low on charge, or somehow that space where the water heater is got incredibly cold for reasons that I can't imagine, but I've never heard of that happening.
Okay.
Perhaps
Yeah,
the electronics froze up.
Well, I don't know. I didn't really hear all the explanation, but the red light came on, and the plumber had to come and had to reset the machine.
Mhm.
And there was some communication with the manufacturer, but I'm not exactly sure. So, but I'm pretty sure that the basement did not reach 37 degrees. Not possible.
He probably meant something other than the coil freezing up, then, is my guess.
Mm-hmm.
And Harris, you can go.
Hi there.
Hi, Ann.
I just wondered, we want to switch over to a heat pump water heater. Right now we have oil boiler, but we have mini splits throughout the house. So we're not heating anything except we have one hydronic zone in the basement, like one hydronic baseboard. So we're wondering if we get, and we don't know how to have no heat in the basement because we had a frozen pipe once when it got below 55. So we're just wondering, is there a way to have a heat pump for the hot water? And then we already have this separate loop with its own circulating pump. Could one heat pump do both those things?
So just make sure I understand the question. So if you put a heat pump water heater in your basement will run a little bit cooler than it does now. So I don't know how often you actually get down to that 55 degrees where you start to heat it. But if, assuming that most of the winter time it's staying above 55 without extra heat, you'll do fine. Once you start heating the basement actively, yeah, it'll rob a little bit of efficiency because you will be using a tad more oil. But you're still gonna come out way ahead compared to just burning oil for hot water.
Bob, this is Steve. I believe Ann is asking whether the heat pump water heater could also serve the heating loop in the basement.
Oh, I'm
Right.
sorry.
Yeah.
I
Right.
misunderstood the question.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a great question. It's probably not designed to do that.
right.
That doesn't mean it can't do it. And people have used water heaters in general to provide space heating. The trick would be, like any water heating source, getting the temperature up to typical hydronic heating temperatures would be tough. That's usually like 180 degrees, and your water heater
Right.
isn't going to deliver that. But if you can work with 120 degrees, it would probably work, but you'd probably void the warranty.
Oh, interesting.
Some of the split systems might be able to do it.
Okay. All right. Thanks. We'll look into that.
Ashwin.
Hey, thank you. This is Ashwanath Chandani from Ashland. First, thank you for putting up a very, very informative session, very timely. Really appreciate it. My question has to do more with how would you compare? So, as we're looking at water heater options, we're considering tankless versus tank water heaters. How would you compare a tankless system versus an integrated heat pump based system? And are there really things that we should consider? Like, I'm not sure how to think about this, so a little help there would be useful.
Well, the reason people love tankless water heaters, one, they're very compact, but I think the main reason people love them is because they basically provide infinite hot water if you're using gas-fired tankless water heaters. Now there are electric, instantaneous water heaters, but they take a lot of electricity, and they're a big chunk of your electrical panel if you try to go that route. So, it's really if you have a very large family and you want to make sure you never run out of hot water, you can certainly do it with a storage water heater. You just need you need to size the tank to deliver the hot water you want. And water heaters have a capacity rating in addition to an efficiency rating. And the capacity rating is called the first hour rating, which is really a measure of how many gallons of water you can deliver within 1 hour before you have a hot water run out. So that would be, that's one thing plumbers look at when they're sizing water heaters. I'm not sure what else I can say about it. If you want infinite hot water, there's nothing that's going to be a gas tankless water heater. I won't deny that, but it's
So, sorry, if I can ask a couple of follow-up questions. One is there such a thing as a tankless heat pump water heater, or that's not a thing at all? Are they always electric or gas?
that's pretty impractical because the heat pump by its nature cannot put out that much heat that quickly. It takes time. It needs a storage tank to really work properly. It's in theory could be done, but it would be completely impractical.
And my second, okay, that's very helpful actually. That does make sense. I hadn't quite thought of it that way. And my second question is if I have a lot of solar panels on my house and I'm basically getting pretty much credits for my solar panels, then would it make more sense for me to just go down the electric path, or is a heat pump based water heater still the better option? Whether it's for carbon neutrality or for cost.
So your question is electrical resistance versus heat pump water heater when you're using?
Yeah, I guess, I mean, an electric-based water heater, given the fact that the house already has adequate solar panels to cover that,
Yeah.
versus a water heater-based, heat pump-based water heater, like, has any study been done or any comparison been done there?
Well, you will hear different answers to this question, so I'll give you my answer to it, which is there is no environmentally benign way to use energy, even if it's 100% renewable. Going to zero carbon isn't necessarily totally environmentally benign. Efficiency is still important. That's why I don't promote using resistance heat of any form, heating your home or heating water, even if you have solar panels providing the electricity. There's just too much environmental impact associated with the embodied carbon of manufacturing, transporting, installing things, on top of the fact that renewable sources don't necessarily match the time you're using electricity, and the grid has to respond and compensate. So you do end up burning some fossil fuels.
That makes sense.
So yeah, go for efficiency. Efficiency is still important, even if you're using renewable energy.
That makes sense. Thank you. That's very helpful.
All right, one more question. What is the life expectancy of an integrated heat pump water heater? Same as natural gas water heater?
Well, I would argue it's pretty much the same as any storage tank water heater. There are exceptions. You can find models that use different materials for their storage tank. It's usually most water heaters fail because something went wrong with the storage tank. There's a leak in the storage tank. And in that sense, it's really pretty similar to other water heaters. I think what's important is to compare the warranties and also understand the implications of the warranty. Is it parts only? Is it parts and labor? That's really telling you what the manufacturer, how much the manufacturer is standing behind the product. But the short answer is, I think you can expect a similar life to other storage tank type water heaters.
Anthony, do you have a question?
I was just going to comment that there is an argument that because the heat pump water heater, the integrated heat pump water heater, has less slower temperature changes, that there's less stress on the metal parts of the tank, so they tend to last longer. There is that argument.
Fair enough. Yeah, could be.
Okay, one more question. Will it work without using an app?
Absolutely. Well, I have to be careful. I bought our heat pump water heater is now 11 years old. No app required. But I personally have no interest in using an app for my water heater. So the next one I get will not require an app.
Okay, no more questions in the chat. Does anyone wants to make a question? So before you start leaving, yes, go ahead.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I was the one who asked about the life expectancy of the heat pump hot water heaters. I'm in Hopkinton and I have a natural gas fired water heater, and they seem to go just after the warranty is up, which is very convenient for the manufacturers. So typically for us, it'll last about 7 years or whatever the warranty is. But if I understand what was said earlier, that the installation cost for the integrated system was $4,000. That's significantly higher than what I would pay when I replace my natural gas fired hot water heater. So I would pay about $800 for the hot water heater and about $700 or $800 for the installation. So say $1,500. So if they last the same length of time, I don't really see the economic advantage to change. Am I missing something?
Not entirely. So 1,500 for a gas water heater sounds really low to me by today's prices. I'm not sure the last time you checked that, but if you can get a gas water heater for 1,500, you could probably get a heat pump water heater from the same plumber for less than 4,000. I don't know. Actually, but on the flip side, you know, I hear numbers of 5,000 or 6,000, and if you have to do extra wiring to put in the heat pump water heater, you have to account for that. But again, you want to build in the incentives, 30% tax credit and the $750 or $1,500 rebate. So those are some things to look at, but you're asking good questions. Another factor, 7 years is kind of hard to say because that's kind of at the low end of normal, but it is a pretty short life. Sometimes the water chemistry in a particular area just eats through water tanks quickly. And there's some areas that 3 to 4 years people are replacing tanks regularly, and that would be a problem for a regular heat pump water heater, given how expensive they can be. So if you do have water chemistry issues that you can't resolve some other way, then you might try to look for a model that uses, you know, a stainless steel tank. There are models that Vaughn Manufacturing, for example, is a small Massachusetts-based manufacturer. They use a concrete line tank. Now, some of the trouble is sometimes when you get into these exotic tanks, the price just goes way up, and then, you know, you're still back where you started. So that's one idea. The other thing, and this is something that almost no one does, but we probably all should do, is most water tanks have an anode rod that is sacrificial and it dissolves over time, but it keeps the, I don't understand the electrochemistry involved, but it keeps the tank from corroding badly. And they should be replaced periodically, but almost none of us do that, right?
Right.
Some water heaters have a powered anode these days. And so if you get a powered anode, that may help make the tank last longer, because that's something that should last indefinitely. So those are my only thoughts on that. But it's a good question.
Okay, we still have more time for questions, but before, let me share another poll with you, just 4 questions. A few more seconds. Thank you again. Anthony, you have a question, a comment?
I just have a comment. I'm surprised nobody brought it up yet, but there is a Westboro Energy Fair on March 29th, and we will have a booth there. So if you have additional questions, stop by and join us.
And what Tony means by we is the Heat Smart Alliance, Tony.
Right, Heat Smart Alliance, sorry.
Tony and Steve Bright are colleagues of mine in the Heat Smart Alliance. And as is Ann Harris, by the way, and there's probably someone else here. I
Yeah,
missed.
Tom Cooper's on board here.
Oh, Tom is.
Mikas also.
Yeah,
Good.
Tom Mikas, yeah.
Tom Mikas, wow, we have a whole crew.
Thank you, everyone.
I just wanted to make offer one more thought to Ashwin about his question about having the solar panels with, and does it matter then whether he uses a electric resistance or heat pump water heater? But if you don't yet have a heat pump for heating your home, I would venture that once you have a heat pump for heating the home, that you will use more electricity than your solar
Fair
panels
point.
can provide. So
For
It's a
sure.
fair point.
yeah.
We're at that stage where I think we're right at that crux of where some of these things are going to start going out. So we have chosen not to replace some of this equipment because obviously you don't want to replace something that's running, but they're right at that 7 to 10 year age. So we're just starting to look at both heat pumps and heating, cooling overall.
We have one more question. So, how often do you need to flush the tank? Is it still a yearly task like gas or oil powered?
What a good question. That's another thing I think most people don't ever do. So I assume it's pretty much the same recommendation as any other type of tank. I haven't heard anything otherwise, but again, that's a maintenance item that most people don't do, and it's probably a good idea. It really depends on how heavy the mineral content is in your water. If you get a lot of minerals in your water, you can get a lot of stuff building up in your tank.
Any other question? We have 3 minutes. Yes, Catherine.
There was a question about what the wiring cost is to upgrade to 240. Is that a question or is that just?
Unfortunately, I can't give a good answer. It really probably depends on do you have a space for it in your panel?
I don't.
Panel. If you don't have space for it, then that's probably a bit more expensive than if you do.
Okay.
But it's hard for me to put out a number. I'm not sure if anyone else cares to venture again.
It could be fairly simple if you have spare slots in your panel where you could plug in additional breakers.
I'm not sure I'd even have that.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you have to put in more panel space, that's obviously going to bump it up a bit.
Yep.
So yeah, these are things you have to kind of have someone look at it and let you know, and then make a decision.
Thank you.
But again, I do want to point out, I mean, it's maybe not the right thing for everyone, but there are 120 volt models available from major manufacturers. The only caution is they have no electric resistance backup. So you really have to think carefully about how much the size of the storage tank. But assuming you can size the storage tank to meet your needs, that's another path you might consider. If you don't have a lot of people and you're not using a ton of water, it might not be that outrageous. It might be very practical.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, everyone who was able to be here. Thank you, Bob, for your great presentation. We learned a lot. I will send a follow-up email with the recording and the presentation. If you have any other questions, you can reach out to me. I will put my email in the chat. But thank you, everyone, and I hope you enjoy it.